It's a start. It's coming together. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to another Glacial Geek Deep Thoughts, Thin Codes with me, Phil, the Glacial Geek. I'm coming to you here again from Glacial Geek Studios, my office here in the new apartment. It's coming along bit by bit, trying to figure out where everything is going to be going, setting it up. I got my paint station kind of set up at this point, not quite all together, so no models, no thin paint, no thin coats today, just some deep thoughts. But it's coming together. Hopefully everything will be together and ready to go for next week's Deep Thoughts, Thin Coats, and I can actually have some thin coats again. Hopefully, that's the plan. So fingers crossed I'll have it done by then. Everything else seems to be going along well. I want to thank everybody who's doing the Patreon. I'm getting together everything and finalizing everything that's coming together so I can start reaching out and talking to you all about the different tiers, the rewards for those different tiers. I need to get together and start figuring all of that out. It's taking me a bit to get through the first month when it gets payments and everything that works out to make sure everything's worked out all right. It seems to be going okay, so I just need to figure that out and I'll get back to you on that. But I promise I thank you all for all the support that you've given me, both with that and just tuning in and listening to my battle reports and listening to my deep thoughts. I really appreciate it all the support that you guys give, the nice messages, the nice comments, everything. It really means a lot. Sharing my videos, everything. It really means a lot, and we're growing pretty fast and it's really exciting. So that's always the good stuff. My first video with Mini Wargaming was up. It's in the vault. Me versus Matt with his Tyranids, literally just Gene Stealers and 4 Broodlords against my Dark Angels. So it was a really fantastic game. I know some of you have watched it. It's really good. If you're a member, the vault member, go ahead and check it out. If you're not, they've got a 7-day free trial that you can give it a shot and see what it's like, see all the different videos they have. But in particular, you can check out that one between me and Matt, which I thought was a fantastic game. So I hope you guys enjoyed it, and hopefully everyone else will get a chance to see it too, which is really good. But other than that, I've just been doing what I'm doing, so keep building up. The scene here in Savannah has been fantastic, and I've been really appreciative of everything that they've done to welcome me in here. I've got our first tournament. My first tournament here is going to be this weekend, so I'm pretty excited about that. See how the competitive scene is here. Give that a shot and see what I can do with that, and just kind of have fun. I've been meeting some really nice guys and having some fun times. I've got some really nicely painted armies, so that's exciting. That was one of my main concerns getting down here, was meeting people to play with and hoping that they had armies that were painted to be on the battle reports, and they have been. So knock on wood, that will keep going that way, and everything seems to be going well. So I've been very appreciative, really like the scene down here, and it's been fantastic. So that's the preamble stuff. Getting now into the heart of the matter of what we're here to talk about. 8th edition and what happens after they're done releasing all of the codexes. You know, that's always been the talk, is leading up to 8th edition, was that they were just going to wipe the slate clean and start new. They were coming out with the indexes, and then everyone had access to all the different armies, and they just had the basic rules so you could start playing, and people wondering what was going to happen. And then they started coming out with the new codexes. So they came out with the Space Marines first, and then they have now, what else do they have? They've got the Space Marines, they've got the Chaos Space Marines, they've got the Death Guard, they've got the Grey Knights, they've got the Adeptus Mechanicus, they've got the Astra Militarum, they've got, what else do they have coming out? They've got Eldar is the next one that's supposed to be coming out, and then after that is going to be Tyranids. So those are the ones that they've got coming out. There may rumors of maybe another 1 or 2 before the end of the year, and then the rest of them should be out hopefully within the following, I don't know, hopefully the first half of the following year, but we'll see what happens as they come along. So that's the story that we've got going on with those. But that's what everyone's talking about, is the new codexes that come out, the different powers that come with the new codexes, how the different armies interact. You know, the fact that now you have, like I talked about with the Imperial Soup or the Chaos Soup list, where they just kind of beg and borrow from each other to make the more suitable lists, and how with the new codexes, giving them powers if they have single detachments of only those, they become less and less of an issue on the competitive scene. And then just kind of seeing how the codexes really affect the game, it makes a big difference. But what no one's really thinking about or talking about really is what happens once all the codexes are out. So once this first codex in 8th edition's out, everything's out, coming the end of the year, they're going to have chapter approved. And once they have all the codexes, what happens then? Games Workshop has shifted a lot of their business model to include these books, the rule books that they've been putting out. So towards the end of 7th edition, it was less of an emphasis on codexes and more of an emphasis on the campaign books, or the books with rules in them for different detachments or different units that came out, but it was basically following a campaign that they had. So the Gathering Storm is a good example of that, or the Leviathan books, or the Montcalm books, or the Curse of the Wolfen books. All of those were campaign books, and that they started to make a pretty penny off of those, and it did well with their marketing to have these books coming out. That became a good part of their business practice. And leading now into 8th edition, they've been coming out with codexes really quick, like blistering speed. Sometimes 2 a month, coming out with these codexes for the new armies, and they're selling like hotcakes as people are buying them up. They bought the indexes, which were sold for real cheap. I'm sure they didn't make too much money off of them, but now going into the codexes, now people are buying those up too real fast. So those, I'm sure, they're doing well for them. That became a big part of their business model. But once all of those codexes are released, what do they do then? Because they're setting up 8th edition now to be more of a living rule set, so that they're going to come out with the chapter approved every year, giving erratas and new rules and special campaigns and special missions that are supposed to come out once a year, all at the same time, so they can have an FAQ, they can have all that together, so you don't have to worry about it coming in bits and pieces, bits and bobs. It all just kind of comes out at that one thing right at the end of the year there, and it's meant to allow 8th edition to evolve as the meta evolves, as the game evolves, as new models come out. All of it is meant to be chapter approved, is meant to allow 8th edition to thrive and develop a lot better and easier than it was in previous editions, where things wouldn't change unless you got a new edition, or things wouldn't change unless you got a new codex. And that started to change once they came out with the campaign books, because suddenly we had new rules that were coming out, new models and new data slates for them were coming out, and now they're making that part of the actual intrinsic nature of 8th edition. So with that in mind, it sounds like they're not looking to change editions often. It sounds like what they're trying to do is stick with 8th edition for a while and not come out with the change like they had 6th edition to 7th edition to 8th edition. It sounds like they're trying to keep it so that 8th edition sticks around for a lot longer. But with that in mind, they're going to have released all of the new codexes within, I think, about a year. They said they wanted to have all the codexes out. And at that point, they're not going to be looking to change editions. What do you do? Where do they go from there? Because they're going to want to put out new books. Do they start over again? And once they come out with the last codex, do they then put out the next new Space Marine Codex and just kind of go from there? Or do they go back to more of the campaign missions like they had with like the Gathering Storm, or like Montcalm, like I said? I don't see them just not putting out books, because that became, like I said, became a big part of their business practice, is putting out these books that could make them a lot of money. And it was successful because the fans enjoyed them. They liked getting them. There were people that griped about having to get 1,000 different books to run their single army, and that's kind of what they've been doing now, is keeping it all together. So you just have the one book that you have to do, unless you want to bring Forge World. But at the same time, they are a business, and they do have to stay afloat. And part of their business practice at this point is putting out books that people want to buy. And I mean, as much as people griped, they still bought the Gathering Storm books. They still bought the Montcalm books. They still bought the Curse of the Wolfen books. Just because they didn't want to didn't mean that they didn't. And I think that I can see them moving back into a campaign mission, releasing books that go along with those, especially with their emphasis on all aspects of the game like they did. I can see them coming out with books that provide new missions for competitive play, new missions for narrative play, and new missions for open play. I could see them coming out with special rules to adjust, sort of like the open war game, the cards, where they had the twist, or they had some of the new things. I could see them coming out with different campaigns and narrative campaigns that you could run with different missions that are meant to be run one after the other between you and your friends or whomever. I could see them coming out with more books like that, centered around expanding the universe. Because they're pushing the clock forward, or they jumped the clock back so that they could push the clock forward and move the narrative forward. I mean, they're releasing Primarchs. They're talking. There are rumors of a new army possibly coming out. I don't think anytime soon, but to be fair, that's kind of always floating around. But I think now, you hear the right kind of people talking about it. And I see this becoming more of a thing where they're trying to, as opposed to keep things at the status quo and just coming out with new rules with it, I could see them pushing the story forward and doing it so that it also impacts the game, like they did with the changeover to 8th edition. Creating the rift within the Imperium, dividing the Imperium, and whatnot. I see them expanding upon it. I could see them coming out with different rules that maybe become optional that you could use, because one of their emphasis was not on having 1,000 books. But then again, I wouldn't put it past them changing that because of the desire to keep the game growing and keep the game going forward. Because once it stagnates, it loses a lot of the emphasis for people to want to invest in it, and loses a lot of the emphasis for people to want to expand within it. I think that's kind of what happened with old Fantasy Battle, was that people got their armies and then they were good with their armies, and they waited until a new edition came out and they buy a new edition, and that was it. And that became hard for them to be profitable within that realm, because if people aren't buying models, if people aren't buying new armies, if people aren't buying the books, they don't make money. And if they don't make money, they can't keep the doors open, and you're never going to have new rules. So I think that's what happened with Fantasy Battle, was that it just became stagnant, and people weren't buying new models, people weren't buying new armies, and it fell apart. The only time it really got a big boost into it was towards the end, when they started releasing the campaign books, so the end times books and things like that. And that's what kind of led to the ones like the Gathering Storm books later in 40K, was they realized that pumped a lot of enthusiasm into the system, into the player base. And from there, they realized that, wow, if that's what it's going to do to the system, maybe we can do that with 40K. And they did, and it was successful. So right now, I think the emphasis is on getting out the codexes so that everyone has a new codex that has all the different powers and fleshes out the armies, because that's one of the main things, is it took away all the flavor. It's like, yeah, they said they were going to do that with the indexes. They weren't meant to be flavorful. They were meant to be the rules so that you could play with your toys. Once you get into the codexes, that's where it becomes more flavorful, with the command points, the command stratagems that you could use, with the different warlord traits that you could use and the different relics that you could use. That's when it became more of a thing, when it became more fleshed out and became more of a reality for people's armies. But once those are done, then they can turn their attention back, at least for a little bit, on the campaigns and pushing the story forward, because they pushed the story forward quite a bit, leading coming into 8th edition. With the adding of the Primaris Marines, with Gilliman waking up, with Mortarion coming around, those are big pushes in the storyline, waking them up and bringing them here and having them become more of an actual entity within the game system and within the world and the realm and the fluff. So I could see them then focusing, once everyone's got their codexes and everyone's happy for at least a little bit, that they can then move forward with expanding the narrative of what they've started to develop with 8th edition. And they'll have the ability then to release, the Gathering, the Storm Has Gathered trilogy of books or whatever that they want to do. And I know that a lot of people weren't happy with that, but I loved the Gathering Storm books. I thought they were fantastic. I thought they were entertaining. The different formations that they had in them were pretty strong, and they were cool rules, but you could play the game without them if you so desired. You know what I mean? I didn't use any of those formations or anything for my games. I got the books because of the narrative and the story that went along with it, and I bought the books for the rules to play with the new models, which I could see them doing, is pushing out new models and coming out with a book to go along with them, until they can gather it all together and then come out in chapter approved. So you don't have to buy those new books to get those rules. You can just buy chapter approved every year, which you're supposed to do anyway, to keep up with the system and keep it, like I said, with the living rule set. And I'm sure they'll release the rules with that, but if you wanted to get them earlier, you can buy them with this book, with the narrative campaign, with the story-driven element to it. and go with them with that way. And I could see them doing it. I think that would be fantastic. Honestly, I would be very excited to have that, so that the emphasis then doesn't become on buying a new codex every 2 months. It becomes on, do you want to buy this book? And if you do, you can. If you don't want to, you don't have to. I didn't buy The Curse of the Wolfen. I didn't buy the Mon-Ka books because they didn't really affect me, and they weren't really what I was looking to do. A lot of people did because they wanted to. I bought 2 of the 3 Gathering Storm books because I wanted to. I thought they were cool, they were interesting, and I really liked them. A lot of people didn't, and that was fine. You could keep playing the game. It didn't affect whether you could play the game or not. If you wanted to, you could get them and use the rules and the models and whatever were in there, but you didn't have to. And I think now what their emphasis is going to be on is that same kind of mentality where it's like, they're there, you can buy them if you want to, they do cool things if you want them to, but you don't have to. And that makes it so that people are happy, so they don't have to buy them if they don't have to. It's not like a new edition where you have to buy the new book. It's not like a new codex where you have to buy the book if you want to play the game. These are supplementary rules, supplementary additions to the game that you can do if you want to, and if you don't want to, you don't have to. And that becomes a choice of yours. And then at the end of the year, when they come out with chapter approved, everyone buys a copy of that, and then they have the rules for any new models that came out so that they could add them to their army without having to buy those campaign books if they didn't want to. And that sounds like a nice happy medium to me if they want to do that. I think it would be fun to kind of drive the story forward, both mechanically and narratively. I think that would be fun. I think that would be really an interesting way to push it forward. Have, major story elements that come out in new models, or major story elements that come out with new campaigns or new missions or new narrative campaigns, like I said. I think it just would be, I think personally, I feel like that would be the best way forward for them, because it proved successful at the end of 7th for them. And I think going into 8th edition, it would prove successful again because of their ability to provide strong narrative appeal and provide strong balance that they've been doing. 8th edition so far has been fantastic. They came out with really cool, interesting models. The Primaris Marines, they came out with Mortarion. They've had a lot of these really cool and interesting models and these new additions to the game that they very easily could have made just game-breaking, but they didn't. They provided them pretty well and balanced. When you look at the results in the GT, they weren't all run by Mortarion and Death Guard, even though they just came out with new models. They weren't all run by Primaris Marines, even though those were new models. That was always one of the gripes that people had with GW, was that when they came out with their new models, they were always super powered so that everyone wanted to buy them. They haven't been doing that recently. What they've been doing is coming out with quality models that people want to buy, while also providing interesting rules that make them playable, but that don't make them broken, that don't make them something that you have to take. You could very easily run a Space Marine army without any of the Primaris Marines and still remain competitive. Just because you bring a Death Guard army with all the brand new models doesn't mean that you're just going to insta-win every single game that you go up against. And I think that's fantastic. I think that's the way that I think they've shown a strong propensity to listen to what's going on in the community, to listen to what players want, which is a big change for GW, and a change that's been kind of happening for a couple of years now. But at the same time, providing new product and providing new narrative steps for us to want to go into and want to invest in. I love the Primaris Marines, not because they're powerful, but because they're cool models to play with. I still run my regular Marines, I still run my everything else, but I like having the Primaris around because they look cool and I want to play them on the table. I know I have a lot of friends who run a lot of Death Guard, and they don't run them necessarily because they think they're going to win every single game with them. You always try to, but they get them because they look cool. And I mean, it's hard to argue with that. Those new Death Guard models look super cool. I'm really excited about how they look, and it really, the way that the design studio has been pushing out these new models with Mortarion, with the Primaris Marines, with the Death Guard, models, they've been awesome, and they've been entertaining, and they've been enjoyable to see. They look good, and I think that's a strong emphasis that they're making, is making good-looking models that you want to buy, not because they're baller on the table, but because they're baller on the hobby table. And I think that makes a big difference, and I think that's kind of the way forward that they've been doing. So I could see them kind of going along with that same mentality with the books, because I think books are always going to be part of their their business practice, because they're a profitable portion of their business practice, and it's something that they can do without having to go through the process of designing, creating the molds, and making new models. They can, put together the books a lot quicker and a lot easier than they can put together new model kits and then support the new model kits. So if they put out like the limited edition runs of those books, there's less of a buy-in for them to put them out there, because they just have the one run that they run through, and once they're sold out, they're sold out, and they don't have to go through the whole process of making molds and printing them out. So I think it becomes win-win for them to put out books, and because of that, it means it's going to be part of their business practice. And after the codexes, what are those books going to be? And I think they'll go back to the campaigns, like I've said. I think they'll go to into a practice that they've kind of been doing with their new models, where you can get them because they're cool. You don't have to get them just to remain, competitive in the game. And I think that's the best way for them to go forward with it. And that seems to be the way of their new system, the way of their new way of running their company, which is fantastic. And I think that's great, which is why I don't have a lot of gripes about 8th edition. I really haven't had problems. I go to tournaments and there aren't people getting salty about it. You can find people getting salty about it on the internet, but you had that in 7th edition. You probably had that in 6th edition. You had that going all the way back, people upset about different things. They look back now with rose-colored glasses, but, the games have been getting better. And in 8th edition, they're a lot more fun. I don't have the arguments with people. I have a fun time when I get down around the table. And the games are closer. If I'm being straight and honest, the games are closer. I don't get blown out of games as much anymore as I used to. If I didn't bring a hard, strong counter to whatever formation that they were bringing in 7th edition, I could very easily get tabled real quick. And I know a lot of people have talked about getting tabled in the Alpha Strike. I haven't seen it. I've won plenty of games going second. I haven't seen the same amount of, whoever goes first tables someone turn 2. It hasn't occurred in my games, and I feel like 8th edition seems to have less of that than 7th edition did, honestly, from what I've noticed. So yeah, I think that's the way they're going to go in the future, is, and it's something to keep in mind and think about as it's going forward, because, even if you're very happy with the way that GW is operating right now and the way they're going forward with the release of 8th edition and the development of 8th edition and the future of 8th edition, it's once all the codexes come out, this cycle that we've gotten into since 8th edition's been coming out is going to change, and it's going to change one way or the other. We'll eventually see, and then eventually they'll probably come out with new codexes for all the armies, as they usually do. But I think the emphasis, again, like I said, is going to be on these campaign missions and the campaign books versus brand new codexes, because that worked for them in 7th edition. I think it's going to work again for them in 8th edition, because if you're putting out new codexes, you need to have a supply of those books available to people in order to play those armies. Whereas those campaign books, you do one run, and once it's sold out, because they're not necessary to play the game. They're just something that you might want to have. And that's a lot easier to just stock once. When you're sold out, you don't care anymore, as opposed to having to keep restocking codexes in order for new players to be able to play. And that's, if that's a good business model, that's something that I'm sure they're not going to throw away with the bathwater. So, yeah, those are just my thoughts on it. Let me know what you think. Did you like having those campaign books at the end of 7th? I know some people didn't, but let me know what your experience was with those campaign books and what you would want the campaign books to be like in 8th edition after the codexes come out. Do you think they're going to go just cycle back around to the codexes? Because, in my opinion, saying that they're not going to come out with books for a while doesn't seem plausible. It just doesn't seem like a profitable way to run your business. If you have this system of putting out books and making money from it, I don't see them just stopping that suddenly. I don't see them just giving up on that, because if it's making them money, I don't see them giving up on that. So let me know what you think. Let me know what you want to think, and let me know what you foresee happening. I know some of you have a less cheery opinion of GW and a less cheery view of what they're probably going to do with the rest of the system. But let me know what you think, and I really want to know because I enjoy having those conversations in our comments, and even on the Discord channel, we've had some cool conversations. I even asked about this on the Discord channel. So that's for people who are patrons. You can get on the Discord channel and have a cool conversation. We've had some really good conversations on there. I'm on there pretty regularly, and I answer most of the questions that go through there. So if you have any questions or you want to join the conversation, become a patron and join the Discord, and it'll be, we'll welcome you and we'll have some fun, cool conversations there too. So I hope you guys have all enjoyed this. I have been Phil the Glacial Geek as always, and until next time, have fun.